I'll call the East Lyme Board of Selectmen meeting to order. It's a special meeting for the purposes of voting, for reviewing budgets. Voting might just happen tonight in our regular meeting, but reviewing budgets says March 6th, so we'll wait to do our Pledge of Allegiance in our regular meeting this evening. So we'll go right to it.
There's, if no one would have an objection, could we move, because there's a couple of conflicts with meetings and so forth, Brookside Farm Museum and Historic Properties up right after the tax collectors? Would anybody object to that?
I'll second that move.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so we're going to start with the registrars because they're here. And hi. So, Mary, why don't you come on up, and if you have your budget, and if you're comfortable at the podium, that'll be good. Or when Anna comes, if you want to. Oh, would you just touch the? Yeah, get rid of the static. There you go. I've discovered that's the problem. It took me 19 years to figure that out, but yeah, when it clicks like that, if you hit it, you get rid of the static. So the registrars is 110. There is some activity here, and so really requested the registrars to make sure they're here to defend their budget, because there's things have gotten a little complicated. Things are complicated in this current year.
Correct.
This 18-19 year.
Right, and it's increasing
Right
it'll be
and
increasing for
then
1920.
some increasing as well. Tell us what's going on in the registrar's world.
Well, in the
Please.
registrar's world, we're dealing with equipment that's 10 years old. There is no replacement equipment, so we're kind of limping along with that. We've had everything gone over because it's getting busier, obviously. So we've had everything checked out and gone over with. We're confident and secure that we can get through the next couple of years without needing to replace major equipment, which is a good thing. What we will be needing to do at some point is just find space, more space, which isn't going to cost money. It's just going to have to move us into a school or something for elections, and especially for presidential. We cannot run two at the community center.
Right.
And also for presidential, that would be part of the reason why we have an increase in the budget, is because we'll be definitely looking at primaries. So which would be April 28th, 2019.
Right, they'll
So
come
that falls in this budget.
in this budget. Wow, already
Yeah,
we're talking
yeah,
about
that's why that's the
presidential
jump in
elections.
there of, between that, for the election day expenses.
You don't have security in this budget listed
No.
out. Have we worked a deal out with the police? I know that
No,
your presence
as a
is
ma-
required now.
Right. As a matter of fact, I'd like to meet with the chief, because there's also some suggestions that we've received from other towns as far as for phones, if they have extra cell phones to lend us for election day, that's a cost savings. So I need to sit down with, the chief.
I think they do.
It was New London who suggested that, like they have undercover phones.
Oh,
And that they
okay.
had extras. So we're always looking to save money. That's something we're looking into, because our phone budget is crazy high too.
So that reader machine,
Yes.
we do the bubbles, right? Remember that? And then we put it in that machine. That machine, brand new, costs how much?
$7,000.
$7,000 to fix it, to get that's to get a brand new one.
That's that
That's
would be a refurbished. There
Right.
is no brand new. Right now, there is a new one in the works, but it has to be approved by the Secretary of State. So what they're doing is taking back the old ones, refurbishing them, and selling them back to the towns at a tune of $5,500 for a used machine.
Let's talk about the ballots. We fill out a bubble
right.
on a printed ballot, and we don't just go over to Quality or
Oh, no.
or Minuteman Press over in New London. We have to use a
There's
particular
only two
source.
printers in the state of Connecticut. Actually, one comes from New Hampshire, and we're looking into the other one.
Okay.
It's 28 cents a ballot, but that's after you get the ballot set up. And each little block on the ballot costs you $35 to $65 to have that keyed in and set typed and so on and so forth. So $1,800 is looking at setting the page alone for the ballot. And when you have primaries, you have entirely different ballots. So it's
every
getting
ballot-
very expensive out there.
So every ballot looks different, and every ballot requires that machine to
Right.
be reprogrammed.
We're lucky that we don't have a divided town as far as any of the other races. You know, we have just, you know, like if you had 20th District or, you know, where Holly's in part of
Oh.
Salem.
Yeah.
Okay, they have multiple districts then.
Oh, wow.
So they're paying more for the diverse ballots.
Montville has 4 or 5.
Yeah, so that's one thing in our favor.
My goodness. Any other questions?
Yes, are we getting good communication from our registrars of vital statistics about removing people from the voting roll?
We get a monthly update. I do, unfortunately, on Mondays, I do the obituaries and catch as many as I can, and then we get from, it's only the death certificates that are filed here in East Lyme for East Lyme residents that we would get. So we're just weeding through that. Occasionally, we'll go through and pick a year and do a search, but that's, I mean, we're getting as best as we can, really.
All right, is that provided by the state or is that provided by our local
Our
registrars?
town clerk provides us the death
So the
death list.
registrars of vital statistics send that to the clerk, and then you
Yep.
receive the information. Okay. Is there any, coming out with some of these new readers and machines, is there any way that we can request the Secretary of the State that we become a test center?
We were last time, we were lucky enough to. We have a 3-day conference coming up in April, and I hope that becomes the conversation that I get to have when I'm there.
Sure.
In which case, they might give us a discount on the machines.
Well, I called, we have 7 machines, we're required to have 6. And I had heard talk, there was 169 machines coming into Connecticut,
Yes.
and it was on Fox 5. So it's Channel 61, so I figured, hey, it's gotta be news. They didn't know a darn thing about it. They said, geez, Mary, it's the first we heard of it. And I said, well, there's 169 towns and we're one of them. We'd like one, at least a new one. Because, we had wet ballots in, I think it was New Haven, and that kind of put a glitch in the works. So we're just hoping that they come along, but we're at the mercy of whoever approves this program, like LHS is the company that has our machines now.
So with the last election, how on target were we with our supply orders and availability of ballots?
Very close, yeah, very close. I say we had maybe 7% extra. This past referendum was tough to tell. But even at that, we had 3,000 and we had 800 extra ballots.
Do you feel that we're running on too close a margin for the presidential?
I think with the upcoming presidential, we're going to have to see what the turnout is for the referendums. I mean, for the primaries. I think it's going to be very busy, and I think we're going to have to go high because it's also a bigger ballot.
Do you feel that this budget then is sufficient to cover that?
Well, this will not cover the presidential
Right.
20, but it'll cover
But
our
the lead up.
Yeah,
The lead up.
yeah, I believe
Primaries.
so.
Do you have, if you're going to go to a third polling place, do you have enough machines?
We'll be able to do that with the 7 we have.
With the 7?
Yeah.
Okay.
Will there be added costs if we go to 3 different polling locations?
Well, security is one.
Yes.
Then there will be, we have this a minor increase in staff. Say maybe an extra moderator, and and so on. But under $1,000, I would say,
Okay.
as the staff cost.
In the past, security has not come out of this budget. Security's come out of the police budget.
Yeah, and it remains that way, but the police hadn't budgeted for it either. And their budget is so tight that they were like, well, we didn't, we can't afford to park somebody down there. But they're doing it, and we're gonna fold it into the police budget.
Is there a possibility that, as there's no school on that day, that the school security forces?
The resource officer could certainly, we only have one resource officer. Then we have the other school security.
Correct.
We could use them maybe for directing traffic in their parking lots and all that, but
Might be
But the
something worth negotiating with the Board of Ed.
well, the actual sworn officer situation has been needed several times during the last couple elections as well. Actual police maintaining breach of peace stuff, and a car accident
Oh, yeah.
in the parking lot as well. They got a little.
Well, it's also
Touchy.
good community. If you have your police officer, which most people don't interact with them, when you're going in to vote, and this is so-and-so officer, so-and-so gives you
It's
a
a good
nod,
thing.
and, so it's good for the community to see, get a face with the name, and gives them good presence.
You got it. Any other questions on this? Any other? Anything from you, Mary?
No.
Thank you for all the details here.
Okay, thank you.
Much appreciated. John McCullough is our tax collector, right? Right. Just checking. John McCullough. Hi, John.
How you doing, Mike?
Running a fine office in there,
Thank you very much.
as tax collectors go. I mean,
Can't say too much. Right.
But real fine staff. We've seen that the level of customer service rise in the last several. Well, always progressing, always
Oh, yeah.
getting better and better. And we appreciate that.
Very fortunate to have my staff.
If you would just kind of run through your budget and anything that is sticking out that we should know about. We're moving some of the printing things. We've been experimenting with
yes,
that,
yes.
and could you run us through some of that?
Well, last year, for the first time since my first year as collector, we outsourced the tax bills, and it worked beautifully. Usually, I think we're probably the last tax office in the county to do all this in-house, the printing, the folding, the stuffing, the mailing out. And it was such a relief last year to be able to outsource that.
Mm.
I know the cost would be quite different, but much higher than, of course, to outsource, but it was a great relief to all of us to have that done.
So we had a conversation about that versus increasing, I think, staff time.
Yes.
Is that what we did? We made a compromise there somewhere
Right.
during
For the
budget
tax aid
review.
position, yes, from 25 to 30 hours. And I know the big issue had to do with whether there would be benefits or not connected to that. And the tax aide said that she had no interest in benefits. I don't know if that would work or not, but I'd like to have her for a few more hours. There's plenty to do, so
Yeah.
it'd be a great help to the
So in
office.
the budget, it is reflective of an increase of 5 hours per week at the tax office. Don't forget, we had 2 full-timers there at one point.
Right.
And we had reduced it to 1.5, and
Right.
we're increasing it 5 hours. We think that extra hour might help out, especially during the busy season. But always good to maintain. It's very tough to run an office with 3 people. One person's out and the other one has to use the facilities or might be at lunch.
Right.
One's on vacation. So it's very difficult sometimes, especially during the high season.
Yeah,
So
it's an adjustment for sure.
it's better to have, well, it's very difficult to have 2 people is what I meant to say. So
Right.
having that third person there more often is
It helps a lot.
it serves the citizens that come to expect that door to be unlocked and someone there to help them.
Of course.
Are there other things we should be cognizant of, or is everything else pretty straightforward?
Everything else is pretty straightforward. Of course, the cost of the service contracts is a pretty steady increase every year. It's about 4%. I called them ahead of time just to make sure that's where they were going. And they confirmed there would be an additional 4% this year. Everything else is pretty much as it was.
They held at 0 last year, is that right? Was that Walsh that held at 0, or was that another service contract? Because you share Walsh with the tax assessor's office, correct?
Yes, we do. Yes. And also, I believe downstairs too, the water department.
If it wasn't 0, we had them reduce it, whatever it was. It was, yeah.
Yes.
There's only 2 sources for this information? There's two companies that can service tax offices, the information they provide for you.
There's a third, I've barely heard of them, but the other is very dominant in the state. And
We're confident that we're getting not only a competitive price, but we're getting over-the-top service.
the service is what the real
yeah.
key. And
Okay.
they've been wonderful for us.
I had a question.
Sure.
So on line 251, the tax bill printing, that went down because of the outsourcing? Am I correct on that? It was 4675.
Right, that was one time only. Well, actually, that was proposal. And
So where does the outsourcing, does that show up in the budget as an expense?
it's usually been about 900
Yeah.
every year as far as.
Anna, you have a mic. Jump in anytime.
Okay, so, for the proposed budget, the tax collector had included funding in order to do the outsourcing. However, as he's been discussing, you said, would you want the extra hours or the outsourcing? And he would rather have the extra hours. So you did reduce the budget by $2,650 for that, and it is noted, in
that's
the detail
$251.
behind the front.
Okay.
Because John had originally requested $4,450.
That was a quote I received from our printer.
Right, so the $1,800 is sitting there is the cost of the paper and
Right.
us doing it ourselves, but
Yes.
still there's a cost to stuffing the envelopes, buying the envelopes and stuffing them and
Right.
printing and all that stuff, and that's
Yeah,
$1,800
purchasing.
for the tax bill printing. We're gonna do it in-house instead of spending an extra couple $1,000s more, or more than that, to have someone else.
So we are doing it in-house?
We're doing it in-house.
Right.
That answers. Thank you.
Other questions for Ms. McCullough? Been down the line? Thanks, John.
Okay, thank you all.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
You were like 3 seconds late, and what Kevin did is he moved somebody else in front of you.
Here for the duration.
Yeah, so blame him.
It's all good.
Are you? Yeah, are you here for the next part? Yeah. Well, yeah. Then should have got a meatball grinder and stayed a while. I think we're gonna hear the historic properties, which is budget 139. So if you want to come on up, is it just you, Barb? Why don't you come on up and sit with Anna, and you can share that microphone. You'll get more comfortable, feel less. 139. Someone has me very organized here. So historic properties is a zeroed budget. And Barbara, why don't you, oh, you're going to hand something out?
I would take that second while you were looking.
Thank you.
And not squander it.
Thank you.
Passing a couple of things around. It is a zeroed budget. What? Oh, sorry. Okay. The Historic Properties Commission, as you all know, we have representation, and we represent Brookside Farm, the East Lyme Historical Society, the Samuel Smith Farmstead, the East Lyme Historic Cemetery Association, the Bike and Barbecue Event Leadership, and we have Selectman Dan Cunningham supporting us at our meetings as well. So I want to thank you all for your continued support for the town's historic properties and our other resources. As a commission, we strive to find ways to preserve not only our town's history, but also all the types of evidence of that history. And whether it comes in the form of big things, like preserving a roof with a beam that's sagging, or saving the first mail truck, or the Bridebrook Bride's wonderful hope chest over at the Lee House, or little things like Mrs. Harris's favorite button hooks, or our hundreds of historic photos, or preserving our cherished ideas and our stories for future generations. This is what we are about. Those stories, like those shared by local historians such as Elizabeth Cookta and Jim Littlefield, and my father's favorite 7th grade teacher, and our town's most famous town clerk's stories, those from Olive Shindali. Those were all important to our town's history, and it's our mission as a collective entity to preserve those for our children and our children's children. So that's who we are, that's what we do. Our budget is brief and small, and we promise we're doing the very best with what we have. If you have any questions, I will be very happy to address them now.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for picking up the leadership that was sorely lost with Luann Lang, and thank you for picking that up and being a leader and donating your time and talent, great talent, I've discovered, great talent for our town. Are there any questions?
Could you just give us an update? We upped your budget, I think, last year, your request for some work at the Samuel Smith House. Did that get complete?
Couple years
we
back.
did not.
Was it a couple years ago already?
Yeah.
It was a couple years ago already.
Our
Okay.
budget, both years, last year and this year, we asked for $6,500 and we were given $2,500.
Yep.
We've got things falling down around us. This year, we are taking that $2,500, and that'll allow us to address the house's most pressing need. I actually mean that in a physical sense, and that we will be repairing a beam that is bowing. The $2,500 won't even cover that one item. We have estimates that run between $3,000 and $3,500, and the Samuel Smith Farmstead Friends are going to be covering the rest of that with donations that they have gathered little by little over the years. It is a difficult situation because there are no reserves, there's no endowment, there's no anything for the Samuel Smith Farmstead. So every penny that it gains, if it has to spend, it has no opportunity to save or invest or put towards something in the future. Does that answer your question?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I know there was something with the chimney that had to be
Yeah.
fixed up. I don't know if that is that complete?
Would you,
Oh, God, no.
Yeah, I don't need a full, I was just wondering if you're making progress on some of those
Well,
items that were
the
before
fact is
us.
we're probably not making progress,
Okay.
but we are at least trying to keep our noses above water with regard to that particular building.
Okay.
Anything else? Speaking of Samuel Smith Farmstead, what I passed out to you was our events calendar for next year, and I invite our selectmen to come and play and participate and see the kind of work that we are doing. The Revolutionary War era encampment was a great success last year.
Great time.
I had, and it's
Great time.
certainly something that it would be worth participating again.
Indeed.
And there you go.
Are there
So-
admissions charged to these?
There are no admissions charged to these events. Yeah, there is a membership, I believe. Is it $5, Ben?
Yes.
To become a member of the Samuel Smith Farmstead. And,
If we charge $5,000 a member, maybe we could get to where we need to be, right? Or $500. I met with Ben a couple days ago and discussed opportunities for maybe, first of all, working with the selectmen more closely to start moving on some of those items that you mentioned.
Yeah.
But by us maybe getting more involved, but also maybe a vigorous effort on some fundraising and taking advantage of some of that. But we'll talk more in the future. Ben, one of those questions about holding that $2,500 is possible. That big question we had about accruing them, absolutely fine. And you and I and Anna will work together on that and some other details on that list that you provided for me. Might as well get that out now because I'll forget later.
Now, one of the reasons for forming this commission was to make grants available. And how are we doing with grant writing?
I believe, of course, the commission was formed before I was even on this coast, and I do see that was one of the things that Luann was excellent at. I think our commission would love to invite anyone in town who has experienced at writing grants to be a member of the commission. At this point, there are no members of the commission who are experienced in writing grants. I personally am I'm very experienced at administering grants and in getting and benefiting from them, and actually being the person who's hired through a grant. But we're learning how to write. Now, that being said, we have made available a list of all of the grant opportunities available to all historic entities, and that is on the town's website through the Historic Properties Commission page. So anyone who is interested in a grant can certainly go there. And we are also, I forget the exact verbiage, but the town of East Lyme is a certified, I think we're just,
Yes, I know what you mean.
okay, and forgive me for not having the correct terms, but we would be allowed to apply for these grants. However, we don't have any grant writers on our team.
Neither do we.
I beg your pardon?
Neither do we.
Right. And
Right.
I mean,
A
I
few.
just
They're
want to be
limited.
straight up.
They're limited.
No.
But perhaps we could get something on the town website, or perhaps we could get a newspaper article in the paper that we would be interested in having anyone become involved that has background in that
Volunteer.
for community service.
That would be absolutely wonderful. Is there a way to do that? It's my understanding I have 5 people and that's it. So how do we get some, I'm really asking this question. How would we get,
Well, you can have anybody.
On the town
assist you.
website? Is that what you're asking?
No,
No, no, no.
on the commission. No,
yeah, on the commission?
but they certainly could, they don't have to be a member of the commission to do
They
it.
could work with the commission.
Correct.
Sure.
To work on.
Great
A
idea.
whole team of people, right?
All right.
We also have a volunteer corps that Sandy and I just communicated by looking at each other, I guess, and said, hey, there we go.
All
And
right.
so maybe we can also work with you to create some kind of narrative that we can put out to the general
Absolutely.
public that says, hey, we need your help. And
Yeah.
would you like to volunteer and put some hours in? Do you have a talent in grant writing?
The writing part? Okay.
Yeah, or an interest in historic homes and preserving history.
Okay.
So we'll work with you on that, Barbara.
That's perfect.
Thank you.
No one asked, but I'm going to mention there's a very small item, a $400 item for the year. And we are going to be applying that to the creation of a townwide digital platform for all of our historic resources. We have a long and short-term goals of digitizing and then electronically housing and curating, along with entities that you'll probably be hearing from shortly, our entire town's history in an easily accessible digital format. This, to me, is really key to telling the town's story. You know, buildings are going to fall. They're going to, the minute, just like they're like we are. The minute they're born, they start to die, and we got to maintain them forever. You know, that's just the way it is. But if we can digitize our history, and then have it easily accessible to generations after generations, that will allow these generations to continue to avail themselves of our story, and to continue that. So examples of that kind of media to be digitized and archived include, but are not limited to, our print, our photos, our film, our video, our artifacts, all of our realia and our oral histories. So I just want you to know we're working on that. That's it.
Thanks. Great.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you, Barbara, once again for all your, all
See you
all
at
that
some
passion,
events.
all the passion you put into this. Appreciate it. Brookside Farm Museum Commission, its inaugural budget under that name. We had to change the tabs in our book to reflect that, and went through great expense. Went through great expense creating new tabs for the Brookside Farm Museum Commission. Much appreciated.